Lemonada. Welcome to Worth It from the Minnesota Star Tribune. Your regular host, Nicole Norfleet, is on another assignment this week. I'm Melissa Townsend, and I'm here with reporter Laura Ewan. Hey, Laura.
Hey, Melissa.
Each week on the show, we share the happenings around Minnesota that we think are worth your time, your attention, and your money. But this week, we're doing something a little different. We're focusing on one story that we're all dealing with. Earlier this week, there was a mass shooting at Annunciation Catholic School in South Minneapolis. We are recording this conversation on Wednesday at 3:30 in the afternoon. It's the day that the shooting happened, and these are the details that we have at this point. 2 children were killed, and 17 people were injured. 14 of them were children. The shooter died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound at the scene. That's according to police. And now we are here trying to process this. And for those of us who have children in our lives, we are trying to help them process this too. So we have 2 people in the studio with us now who can help. Jenny Britton is Chief Clinical Officer from Washburn Center for Children, and Matt Witham is Director of Child and Family Services at Gillette Children. Welcome, you 2. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I'm always curious about what is physiologically happening for people in this situation. I mean, for the people who are trying to find their children, for those children. Can you talk about that? Talk about just physiologically, chemically, what happens to a person in that situation?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there are fairly sort of common stress responses that we experience in the midst of, tragic events. So for those that would be there, and I'll caveat this by saying it's really hard to put yourself into the perspective of someone that's actually there at the event, but sort of the standard fight, flight, or freeze response when you're in the midst of a tragic event or really distressing or highly stressful circumstance is pretty common. So how do I, maybe I shut down, maybe I run, maybe I hide, maybe I stop. These are pretty typical responses of what one might be experiencing.
The only thing I would add, if it's okay to add here, is that we're hardwired for survival, which is what Matt's talking about, right? So our body and our brain naturally does fight, flight, or freeze, depending on who we are, what's happened within our life, and how we're walking into any given moment. And that hardwire for survival is really important because it gets us through the moment. What happens after fight, flight, or freeze is very vast and wide for people, right? That's where anger, tears, exhaustion, fainting, some of those other things can come next, right?
That was my next question. Yeah. What next?
What comes next is much more individualized for people. And for kids, it's really different. All 7-year-olds might respond differently. All 12-year-olds might respond differently. It's not even developmental to say 7-year-olds respond this way, period. Right?
Yeah.
We're all over the map in response. And so it's just important to know that it can look very different in our kids.
Yeah. What does a caregiver look for? Because it feels to me like I'm a parent. I have 2 children, one in middle school, one in high school. It feels like my job is to kind of help them along through this process of, oh my gosh, this thing happened and now let's try and get through this. What do we need to be doing?
I think it's important as a caregiver to be willing to have the conversation, to be willing to take those steps and say, I'm going to be the one that talks to you about it. So you think about all the sources in which a child can hear information. I think it's perhaps a good thing to say, I'm going to be the parent, so I'm going to step up. I'm going to be able to provide the information that I would like my child to know here moving forward.
So, it's not okay to say, oh, my kid didn't mention it. I'm sure they haven't heard it or it's fine. You actually have to go there.
They know. They know from friends. They know from the feeling around them. Our kids are the most receptive beings on the planet, right? They're wired to absorb, what's happening around them verbally, non-verbally, whether they've witnessed it or not. The grown-ups are different. The grown-ups are worried. So then worry can be instilled in them without meaning being made. And so as Matt's point, right, it's important for us as adults to make meaning of, and we can't, of course, there's nothing we can say that says we understand why the shooting happened, right? But we can say we understand your worry. I'm worried too. It's important that kids know parents have all the feelings too. Sometimes as caregivers, as adults, as parents, as step parents, we want to show that we've got it together, right? That somehow that confidence is going to help our child feel confident. What happens with kids, however, is that they need to know that feeling not okay is also normal. And then what do they do with it? So if you have an adult who can say, I'm sad, I'm mad, I'm overwhelmed, right? I don't know what to do, but here are the 3 things I'm going to try. And then I'm going to see if they make me feel better. Do you want to try them with me? Because if adults just say, okay, this is the conversation, this is what happened, I'm going to be okay and you're going to be okay, any unleft feeling gets trapped in their nervous system, in their brain, in their epigenetic makeup. And we don't want that for kids.
And I think, it's important to know that these shootings don't affect only the people who were shot, but they can have lasting impacts on bystanders. And as we discussed the shooting here in Minneapolis, I mean, there are families who lived near the shooting, maybe just heard the gunfire. So what support do those kids need, kids who were not victims in the traditional sense, but who were somehow exposed to that violence?
My answer would be almost exactly the same. I would, as adults, I would make sure you're taking care of yourself, that you get yourself grounded and settled to have the conversation as much as you can. But you listen, you ask questions, whether you were in the school, you're outside the school, or you're peripherally even impacted by what you're hearing on the news and what it means to be a parent, and school starting for kids next week. And some have already started this week. There's a lot mixed up in this for our whole community. So I would say the advice is similar about how to respond to anybody, any child who's talking about, hearing about the event.
There's a trauma researcher, writer by the name of Gabor Mate, who talks about trauma as not the event itself, but what happens inside of us as a result of the event. And so, Laura, to your question, we need to inquire about what's happening on inside of other people. And so a willingness, like Jenny had said, to have the conversation, to inquire with that child about the way that this is impacting them. And then if in the event that they need further assistance, to be able to reach out to perhaps to professionals for some additional help.
And how can we control the environment in which these facts are being discussed? I mean, it's hard to do this as a journalist, but should I be turning the TV off, the radio off? Should we be limiting our kids' access to social media?
That's a good question. I would say, depending on the age of the child, I would limit news. I would limit media because you want the facts if that's what you need, right? The media is wonderful and giving us up-to-date information, right? But how much do kids really need to hear and know for them to settle their nervous systems enough to work through this? And so I do think that some kids might benefit from having their parents listen to the news with them so that they can talk about it afterwards. And some kids will benefit from turning social media off, turning the news off.
So you're watching your child or children to sort of see where they're at and what they're taking in and how they're handling it. If a kid is like, looks fine, everything's fine, do you think there's something going on underneath that?
It's a good question.
I don't think we know, but I think parents know their kids, and I think that's their expertise to be able to hold in the midst of this. And so if a child says, I'm doing okay, they may be okay, but not every child is going to be impacted significantly around events like this.
I tell you, I know my eldest child, and all day long she'll be fine, but at bedtime, she will say, Mom, I'm really scared. And when everybody's exhausted and nobody has any more life left in their body.
It's always at bedtime.
And I would say, it's opportunities like getting kids in the car when they're not looking at you face to face. The car therapy is a real thing, whether you're a parent or a therapist, right? You take a walk with your kids, your bilateral stimulation. I mean, they're chewing up the memories within their body, the left and right hemisphere of their brain, like they're moving with you. It helps them actually process through. And so like if our kids are saying, I'm okay, they might just be okay. I would also say, is it okay with you if I check back in? Because today you might be okay, but I want to make sure we have an opportunity to connect about it, because feelings can come and go. And I just want you to know that I'm here for when they come. Right. But like walking, movement, all of those things help our body biologically process. It's why exercise is so important, why play is so important, right? Like moving your body, drumming, listening to music is all really important.
It's time to take a break. We'll be back in a minute.
If you like Worth It, you should know it's just a tiny taste of all that the Minnesota Star Tribune has to offer. We've got an all-access pass to everything Minnesota, from outdoor adventures to the hottest food spots you've never heard of. From puzzles and games to the best concerts and happenings around the state. It's all here all the time. So subscribe to the Minnesota Star Tribune. It's a great deal. Go to startribune.com/worthit to subscribe. That's worth it to subscribe, all one word.
I want to talk again about just the proximity of this shooting, because sadly, a lot of us parents have had some version of this talk with our kids, because school shootings have been part of their reality their entire lives. I was pregnant with my first child when Sandy Hook happened. So this school shooting, of course, is in our own backyard. And does the fact that this happened in Minnesota change how children might be processing the news or how we talk to them about it?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, this is our community. Proximity absolutely has an impact. Particularly, one of the things that happened to me prior to this interview and earlier today was a series of texts that went around from my friends and family that said, "Oh, I know someone who worked at Annunciation," or "My priest that was assigned to my church is now down at Annunciation. I hope he's okay." There were all these texts that said, "This has impacted our community. This has impacted us."
I think it also just shatters the illusion that it can't happen here.
Right.
And whatever safety they may have felt because it was in a faraway place, that's just gone now. So I can just imagine that kids are feeling even more afraid.
I think there are some things we can do to help, right? I mean, as we're thinking about kids going back to school, kids benefit from structure and routine. And that's really hard to navigate during these times, right? Like I've heard from a lot of families today, like, do we go to soccer practice? Do we attend therapy as usual? What do we do tonight? And the answer is really, it's an individual choice. I mean, what you need to do and what every child needs is going to be different. But structure and routine is helpful. And there's ways in which we can think about connection with kids as they go back to school. Like, let's figure it out together. What if I wrote you a note for your lunchbox so that you heard from me midway through the day, right? I'm going to be home from work, or I'm going to be, able to take a call when you come home from school. I'm going to meet you at the bus. This is your bus stop. I'll see you here. I'll get you on the bus, and I'll make sure I'm here when you get off the bus.
Speaking of back to school, this can be a rough transition for any kid, even in the absence of something as horrific as what we've seen today. What can we expect in terms of just how our kids will be feeling or behaving, how things might be coming out sideways as they return to the classroom in light of Wednesday's news?
I think we're going to see behaviors. I think behaviors are going to be telling. I think behaviors could be not being able to sit still, rolling their eyes, leaving the classroom. I mean, it could be a lot of things. Behavior is a child's way of telling us they're feeling something, right? So it isn't their way of saying they're a bad kid or anything like that. It's their way of communicating that I'm feeling some kind of way, right? So I think it's paying attention to some of those behaviors. We might see more physical complaints, headaches, body pains, stomach aches, not being hungry, being extra hungry, and some of those changes in normal interactions we'll start to see with kids. It could, of course, increase anxiety, fear, maybe not wanting to leave the home, needing more help getting to and from school for the first couple of days. I mean, there could be a whole cascade of things depending on how the child and family are doing with the events.
And with all of that, I'd say I don't know about those of you with kids. I mean, I got an email from my district right away that said, "Hey, we want to acknowledge this. We want to let you know that we're aware of this, that we're providing supports to your child if that's something that they want to access. We have resources for you to be able to reach out and access as well." I think reminding kids that those things are there for them is a really important thing. And I think that these are the times in which kids lean into the caregivers and say, "I may be lacking some confidence. However, can I borrow yours?" And this is an opportunity. We don't have to be perfectly confident. We talked about that earlier. We can be real with our kids, but there's a sense of, school is a place where you can go and you can be safe. And I want to remind you of all the things that the school is doing in order to make sure that you and your friends are being cared for and are being safe. And if you don't have answers to that, that's something to reach out and have a conversation with the leaders at the school or a teacher or something like that. It says, "I'm anxious about sending my kid." And the school's response should be, "Of course you are. Why would you not be? We had a terrible, horrific event that just happened." But let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing to keep your child safe. And so having those conversations about the way that the individual schools are really taking this seriously, I think is an important pairing to the conversation.
I just love what you're saying about when children feel like you're thinking about them, make it clear that I am taking care here. I do notice that with my own children, just a level of ease comes over their bodies when I'm like, I organized what we're going to do. And
Right.
and for myself, the same, right? That's why this advice for parents, I think, is so incredibly essential because time doesn't stop, right? I'm at work. I'm going back to work tomorrow, even though this happened. How do you have advice for parents to find that place where they do feel cared for, or how to even just manage it all? Because the world doesn't stop when something like this happens, and you kind of need it to.
Yeah. As a caregiver, you probably want to do more. You want to do it the best. You want to make sure your kids have all of the things they need. But reestablishing that sense of safety and belonging and connection with the caregiver is one of the very best things you can do. Because that's what our kids need in order to navigate the wild feelings they're going to have. I mean, we're talking about, trauma responses to an event, but this is also bringing up, complex grief. What does it mean to live in a world where this can happen at a school? What does this mean for me as a parent as I'm thinking about sending my child to school or my child's already in school? But there's complicated grief wrapped up in all of this that we're going to be navigating as a community moving forward.
That's what I find so agonizing is that as a parent, you can't guarantee that your kid will be safe at school, as ludicrous as that sounds in our country today. So
I
how
know. I wish you
truthful
could.
I know, I mean, and that's why so many of us feel powerless because it feels like nothing has truly changed in the past decade or so. So how truthful can we be about the situation with our kids when you know that there's not much a school can do when a violent person shows up there with a gun?
I mean, I don't think you have to say, you know what, you can go to school and there's something could happen to you. I think at this point in time, I would lean back into the point that I'd made earlier of these are the efforts that are being made. This is how serious the school is taking it. Those are the types of, I think, very clear and honest answers that we can provide for kids.
So I might say something to a kiddo like, I really wish I could just tell you, no, that will never happen at your school. I wish I could, but you know what I can tell you is that you will always be safe with me. And I will do my best to show up for you every single time you need me. Can we make a deal that you'll tell me? Right? If you go back that way, I would imagine you'll watch the nervous system of a child settle by knowing there's something special for them. So global safety is hard to promise, but relational safety, when it's attachment and attunement and connection and love, does something really beautiful within the body of a child. And that's actually the kind of safety they need above almost anything else.
We need to take another break. We'll continue the conversation in just a minute. As you're talking, I'm thinking my children will go back to school on Tuesday after Labor Day, and I'm thinking, oh, we'll have this conversation in the morning, and I really want to point them to people. Who can you talk to? Who can you go to? Whose room can you go to? And then I will be here when you get home. Does that sound right?
That's exactly right. It's
Well
exactly
done.
right, Melissa.
Okay.
The thing I would, if something tangible is helpful, Matt, please tell me you know the author of this book, because I'm drawing a blank. The Invisible String.
Oh, I don't.
It's a really wonderful book about what happens when you love another person and they travel around. They can go to the moon, they can go other places, but this invisible string will bind us forever.
The invisible string, you
And
said
that's
string.
the invisible string. Yeah, it's really nice for kids to sort of be a way to talk about, like, this is how our love works when you're not here, right? Talking about building the confidence to go out, but you have the strength and fortitude to come back with your attachment figure.
I love the tangible.
I love that.
I need a
Yep.
script. I need a script. So,
Well, can I tell you where you can find one? A script.
yeah, please do.
So if you go to Washburn's website, we have advice for talking with kids about community violence. And there's 5 steps we have listed here, including some questions that you can ask your kids. So we tried to simplify it as much as possible. So the first one is ground yourself. Like, give yourself a few minutes to make sure you're in the right place to have a conversation with your child. The second one is settle. Like, stop and sit with them, create a calm and quiet environment. Turn off the news, remind your child that they're safe with you at home, practice deep breathing. And then the third is to listen. And then there's questions on here that you can ask. How are you feeling in your body? What do you know about what happened today? 4 is explain in an age appropriate way. And so it kind of says here, if you have younger kids, keep examples simple and brief.
Younger meaning
For
like
older-
early elementary school, would you say?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
like what's something that you could tell, like a 6-year-old?
If I were to say it to my nephew, who's 6 years old, which is who I pictured in my face, and then it made me sad. I might say something like, so some things happened today at a school, and some kids got hurt. And that's not really what we want to have happen at school. And so we wanted you to know that we are here to talk with you about any questions you might have, any wonderings you might have. Depending on your child, you might share more details, right? They might know some things. So if they had come to you and said, hey, I heard there was a gunman, hey, I heard there was this, then of course you want to address that. But if they hadn't necessarily heard all the details, you can say, like, things happened that shouldn't have happened at school and some kids got hurt. And it's important for you to know that happened. It's important for you to know that I know it happened. And it's important for us to be able to have that conversation together.
And I think one of the ways that I would sort of help to close the narrative as you continue to work on that with your child is, and there were people that responded really quickly to help. The helpers were there. People reached out, and the emergency medical team and our law enforcement, they came and they did their helping job. And so that may be some language that you use with younger kids to let them know that there are people that in emergency situations do respond and that are there. And so it's giving that sense of, yes, this thing happened. There was a response to that thing. And then there were people that came in and helped to bring some support as needed.
And going on to what would you tell a tween? So we're talking about maybe late elementary school or middle school.
I mean, I would be much more transparent with a preteen, teenager. Jenny's resource that you mentioned at Washburn Center for Children is great. I think also the National Child Traumatic Stress Network in particular also has some great resources. They have one that's specifically parent guidelines for helping youth after a recent shooting. And so that's very similar in terms of the recommendation. I might take a glance at that if I was a parent and just say, I don't look through some of these things. And part of that communication that you have with your kid is being able to anticipate some of the emotional reactions they might have and be able to name, you may be feeling worried, you may be feeling fearful, you may be wondering about whether or not it feels like a good idea for you to go back to school tomorrow. Putting some of that out there gives your child the confidence that you have a sense of what they might be going through. These are really common reactions to this. And so putting language around what a reaction might be, and then be able to provide pathways of ways of addressing it. So first, way to go talking to me about it. That's why I'd say, thank you for coming and sharing with me. Be willing to sort of divulge this. Or maybe a child isn't. We know how teenagers are, at least in a stereotypical sense. They may not be willing to divulge that. And so you say, you know what, this may be the way that you're reacting. And if now is not the time to come and talk to me about it right now, just know that I'll bring it up soon. Would it be okay if I brought it up again tomorrow, just to check in on you to see how you're doing? And it gives that sense of continuity that even if we're not talking now, I'm willing to talk with you again about it tomorrow and the next day.
Can I ask, sometimes my children, and I imagine other children do this too, they ask about the shooter. What would you say about the shooter?
I would wonder what they know first, what they think might be happening, because I want to know where their questions are coming from. Is it about curiosity? Is it about uncertainty? And one thing I find to be really important for older kids in particular, is to correct any misinformation or misperceptions that they may have received, because I don't know where they're getting their information from. Right? Is it from their friends? Is it from a credible news source? And so I think listening to kids and having them fill you in on what they know first helps us know how to respond about details of any kind related to the event, but also details related to the shooter.
Well, the shooting at Annunciation School that we've been talking about wasn't the only shooting this week. It's only Wednesday, right, that we're having this conversation. There were at least 3 other shootings between Tuesday and today in Minneapolis. This level of violence can make you scared, of course, but also that feeling of powerlessness and helplessness. I feel like we don't talk about that as much as we talk about fear. How do you tap into that feeling, and how do you work against that feeling of powerlessness?
First acknowledging it. The fact that, Melissa, that you're putting words around it, I think is a really important thing to do. And so adding that to the litany of different reactions that may be a response of your child is an important thing to put out there, that it's a time where we may feel powerless, a time we may feel helpless. However, I think there are a number of ways that we can promote sort of I don't know if antidote is the correct word, but it's perhaps sort of an antidote to this, is it through some of those familiar routines, structure, and practices that often go on in families. I'm not going to try to do the quote because I'm going to botch it, but there's a really great Mr. Rogers quote on the value of structure. Talks about it in sort of the waves of life or something like that, that tradition and routines are sort of an anchor to a boat in these waves.
That Mr. Rogers he was a good egg.
I know, so good.
Lots of wisdom.
I know, so good. But I do think that there's truth to that, to be able to say these are the ways that we go about our business as a family. And so things like daily routines, eating meals together. Maybe there's a routine of checking in with your child when they come in the door. We can feel stable in the things that we do as a family, the things that we continue to do as a unit.
Is there anything else that you want to say to a caregiver who's struggling with how to talk to their kids about this?
You've got this. It's awkward. It might not feel good. It might not be comfortable, but you being comfortable and knowing exactly what to say isn't what your kids need you to do. What your kids need you to do is have the conversation and let it be awkward and say, I have no idea how to talk about this, but I know talking about this is important.
Jenny, I think that if someone's looking for a script because they don't feel confident, those are the words right there. Going through a tragedy, going through a horrific event is never easy, but doing it alone is a million times harder than it is doing it with someone else. And so just coming alongside your kid and saying, I don't know what to do here, but I know that I need to have a conversation with you because something terrible happened. And so I'm here.
Great advice. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Happy to be. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, our pleasure.
And thank you for listening. We'll be back again next week. Worth It is a co-production of the Minnesota Star Tribune and Lemonada Media. It's normally hosted by Nicole Norfleet. The production team includes me, Melissa Townsend, Chrissy Pease, and Tiffany Bowie, with help from Zoe Jackson and Casey Darnell. It's mixed by Johnny Vince Evans with technical help from Matt Gilmer. Our theme was composed by Dan Malad. Lemonada's Senior Vice President of Weekly Content and Production is Steve Nelson. Greg Meese is the Deputy Managing Editor at the Star Tribune over audio, video, and photo. Executive producers are Stephanie Whittles-Wax and Jessica Cordova-Kramer. Help others find our show by leaving us a rating and writing a review. And you can follow Worth It wherever you get your podcasts or listen ad-free on Amazon Music with your Prime membership.